What's going on, Dodgers Nation? Doug McCain here. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at DMac_LA. And thank you, fans. Welcome to another edition of the Dodgers Nation Roundtable. And today I'm joined, as always, by Mr. Clint Pasillas. You can follow him at RealFRG. And we've got a newcomer to the Dodgers Nation Roundtable. If you want some expert Dodgers analysis, I know a guy. His name is Noah Cameras. He's a writer here at Dodgers Nation. You can follow him at Noah Cameras. So go ahead and go give him a follow. Also, let us know down below in the comments section, how big of an organizational failure was this by the Dodgers? Is this the biggest fail in Major League Baseball postseason history? We want all your takes down below. And for all latest Dodgers news, head over to DodgersNation.com. But here we are, and we're still trying to dissect what happened in the NLDS. The postseason was not what we hoped it would be. The regular season, it was outstanding. 111 wins, a franchise record. We expected a deep run, but that is not what we got. We got 111 wins in the regular season and one in the postseason. In the regular season, the Dodgers were like a Gulfstream G700 private jet. In the postseason, they were like Spirit Airlines. Okay, the Dodgers, they weren't able to get to their destination. It was a rough and uncomfortable ride, but we want to talk about Andrew Friedman's press conference. And I thought he had a lot of interesting things to say. It looked like he hadn't slept since the Dodgers lost. He was looking a little rough out there, but he was a little defensive at times. I thought that, yeah, he was accountable. We're going to dive into what he said. But the first thing I want to touch on is his comment that the Dodgers were an organizational failure. And the first question I have for you today, Clint, is, which part of this Dodgers organization failed them the most? Was it the front office? Was it Andrew Friedman by not making a trade at the deadline? Was it Dave Roberts' decisions? Or was this just a matter of the offense didn't have it, baseball's going to baseball, and sometimes you're just cold? Who do you think was the biggest failure this postseason?
I mean, it was a blanket statement. He had nothing he could point to. There's no one thing he could say about how the team lost or what the hell happened. It had only been a couple of days. They didn't know. They have a whole, they have 3 extra weeks of offseason to kind of figure it out. To call it an organizational failure, again, it's a nice blanket statement, but really it's blaming nobody. It's blaming the think tank way that this team runs the organization. Because he's not going to go in there. He's not going to throw Dave Roberts under the bus. He's not going to go throw Mark Pryor. He's not going to throw Mookie Betts the way so many people have thrown him under the bus. I mean, we've said some things on Blue Heaven, but I don't think it's all Mookie. It's not all Trey Turner and his errors. I mean, you look at some errors, yeah, it costs a game, but it is the best way and the worst way of saying it. It was everything, and it was also a team that just, I mean, as prepared as you can be to win 111 games, they did not look prepared to beat these Padres that were riding high in a short series.
Yeah, and you lose as a team, you win as a team. And I think that I agree with you 100%. I think that it was a blanket statement. He doesn't want to get specific. He doesn't want to throw anyone under an 18-wheeler at that point. So, look, I mean, he had a chance, so he could throw him under a double-decker bus, and he didn't choose to go that route. He didn't sell Dave Roberts out. He didn't talk about just specific parts of this team. It was basically a situation where he said, yeah, we failed as an organization, but on the same token, if you're Andrew Friedman and everyone's dancing to the beat that you created, I think that, of course, you're not going to say specific parts, because I think everyone is tied in to his vision. But what are your thoughts on Andrew Friedman and what he did at the trade deadline? I was pretty critical. I think we all were. We thought, hey, this is a team that has a small window when you consider the group they had put together. Do you think they should have done more at the deadline to address things like starting pitching, maybe add another impact bat? What's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, at the time of the trade deadline, I was pretty confident in the team that, they had at the moment, especially they had Walker Buehler, at least publicly expected to return. They had Dustin May expected to return. So starting pitching didn't feel like an issue for me. But when I look at the trade deadline, I'm looking at what the Padres did do. And you think, Juan Soto had the game-tying hit in the 7th inning in Game 4. Josh Hader looked like the best closer in baseball history that entire series, especially the last 2 games. So it wasn't as much as the Dodgers didn't do enough. It's the Padres just did so much in that trade deadline. that their pieces ended up being the reason they won. And, obviously Joey Gallo didn't even play. Chris Martin looked good, but I just think at the moment, I didn't think they should have done more. But when you see what the Padres did do with their acquisitions, it's hard to not regret a little bit.
Yeah, I think when you look back at the opportunity they had, there wasn't very many guys out there. The price tag was very high for Luis Castillo. You saw the Mariners gave up 3 of their top 5 prospects. When you consider the extension that he signed, I think that's a deal where I don't think Bobby Miller is going to have the career that Castillo's going to have. And I look directly at this camera at the trade deadline. I say if the Dodgers don't trade for an impact starter, they're not going to win the World Series.
Yeah.
And the reason why I felt that way was validated in that first round series, because you saw this 5-and-die style that the Dodgers were going with, where it doesn't matter. It could have been Sandy Koufax in 1963, and Doc's going to pull him after 5 innings. It could have been prime Randy Johnson. He was going to go deep into that game. But I think when you consider what A.J. Preller did, how aggressive they were, and they went out and they did mortgage their future to try to win down, to try to slay that Dodger dragon, and they did just that. So I definitely think they could have done more at the deadline, but I also think that it goes deeper than that. I think when you consider that this Andrew Friedman and the players that they thought were going to come back, the Walker Buehlers, Dustin May, Tony Gonsolin got injured, I think they overvalued the status of those players. I mean, what's your thoughts on that, Glenn?
Well, I know that's something you rode high for most of July and into the after the trade deadline, being critical of the lack of moves. You can't guarantee these guys come back and are who they say they are on the back of their baseball card. Canely was good in a small sample size against bad teams in September, ended up being a big time problem there in October. Team loses there. You got to make a move. I think there was a lot of perception issues for this team. They didn't win a trade deadline. I mean, the Padres going out and getting Josh Bell is like kind of a throw-in in the Juan Soto deal. That's a net gain over the Dodgers getting Joey Gallo. And I understand at the time they didn't necessarily needed Joey Gallo. They were hoping to get something out of Joey Gallo, but you knew you got to have pitching. You got to have more pitching, and I think you didn't expect Tony Gonsolin to end up getting hurt. You should have thrown more innings than he ever had in his life. But there's my non-answer for you. I mean,
no, I think it's a great answer, Clint.
They needed to do something more.
Yeah.
It definitely feels like it. But at the same time, they had a bunch of bodies that they felt they could rely on. And let's be real. This World Series, they didn't make it to the World Series. Wasn't because they didn't have pitching. It wasn't because they didn't have a Josh Hader. The bats didn't get it done, and postseason it's all about momentum. And one team had it, the other one did not.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Sometimes you just don't have it. But kind of going back there, and we're going to unpack this a little more, we're going to move on, is I've always said parades over prospects. And yes, the Dodgers are built for sustained winning, but one World Series in 10 years. And I don't care about anyone's opinion on the 2020 World Series. Even if that was a full regular season, I still think you should have been able to squeeze more championships out of this run. And I think if you're this Dodgers team, you realize that, you want to win, but you're only going to remember those World Series titles. And I think that now they're going to shift. And I want to kind of pivot to this is based on this organizational failure where they didn't just squeak into the playoffs and lose in the first round. No, they are the first team in Major League Baseball history to win 109 games and not even make it to the championship series. So considering how dramatic of a loss this is, what kind of organizational changes do you think are coming? We're going to get some of those philosophical differences, but what are some organizational changes that you might think could happen in this offseason?
Yeah, the big thing that we've been kind of talking about and seeing is the Dodgers need guys who can hit in October. And that's kind of the big thing. It's the guys who kind of have the dog in them that people like to say, the fight in them, the guys who have the spark in them. Yeah. And unfortunately, this team just didn't have those guys. They didn't have the people who really stepped up in big moments. And you saw, they didn't play an important baseball game for the last 6 weeks of the season or something. Yeah. And then they had the 5 days off. So they just kind of, it didn't look like they cared very much. So you kind of want to start and bring in those guys who, maybe haven't won before, haven't been in those moments. When you look at the Padres dugout, any base hit they had, these guys were up, they were celebrating, and that could look annoying at times, but it also really gets your team into a series like this. And the Padres had a bunch of guys who hadn't been there before and really wanted it. And the Dodgers had a bunch of guys who win all the time and have World Series experience, and they just didn't have the want that the guys on the Padres side had.
A question I have for you, Doug. Do you think this Dodgers team has just been too successful? I mean, they don't even celebrate. There's a champagne toast for clinching a playoff berth. There's an hour of drinks in the clubhouse, an hour of libations and cheese platter when they clinch their ninth division in 10 years. Are they just? Is it? What's the word I'm looking for? What's the phrasing I'm looking for?
Yeah, no,
they're victims of their own success.
No,
in a way.
yeah, I think that there is something to that, and I think that that's also seen with the Dodger Stadium crowd. I mean, you compare the Dodger Stadium crowd where, yes, attendance, no one's going to touch the Dodger Stadium crowd, but they're used to swinging the towels, they're used to winning. But I do push back on a lot of Dodger fans out there that say, oh, look at the dugout of the Padres, they're going crazy. Look at the dugout of the Dodgers. What's my favorite thing in the world? Kobe Bryant's job not finished.
Yeah,
you didn't see Kobe going up there and celebrating. Give me a cold-blooded assassin. I think the Dodgers, they're not sitting at home on their couches right now because they weren't cheering like a softball team cheers on their team. I definitely think there is something to that in the clubhouse, the fire in the clubhouse versus, we're going to celebrate every hit. I think that's a great thing. And I went back and I watched some of the games from 2020. Every time there was a Barrels are overrated, you see the Barrels are overrated. You didn't see that with this team. You saw a lot of golf claps. It was quieter than a library at times. And I do think that does start with Dave Roberts a little bit. I think you kind of just let's go. Let's get this thing going. So I think confidence is contagious. And I also think that there's some of that too. It gives the guys confidence when you're going out there and you're just celebrating. So I definitely think that this team and just on a simpler term, just the general vibe of this team was very business-like. When they won games, it was like, this is a Dodger machine. But hey, guys, what happened to pepper grinders? Huh? What happened to the pepper grinders? What happened to the splash of water? What happened to the Wolf of Wall Street, the Wolf of the Ravine? Where was that fun in the postseason?
I think
a little gentle tap. Oh yeah, it was a little.
They're like, we have done well, team. Kudos to you.
Exactly, right? So, I do feel like a lot of that, too, was just the pressure that was on this team. Some guys just weren't able to handle it. So, do you think that led into it, too?
This team, you have, by the time you're playing again in October, you have the one team that's left that has the highest payroll. They weren't higher than the Mets, but the Mets were bounced. You have the highest payroll. You're playing against a team that you beat 14 times. A team that has been talking smack and building to beat you for years, and they didn't have it. I lost the question because I started going into other
you're right.
mind
Sometimes
thoughts.
We can dissect this and we can just do a complete autopsy report on this Dodger team. But sometimes teams just have the juice. Sometimes teams don't have it. And I think more than any other sport, if you win the wild card round in Major League Baseball, that just springboards you to the next round. And the Padres, they got exactly what they wanted. They wanted the Dodgers. They got them and they beat them.